Welcome back to the Mackem in the Middle podcast. After another Sunderland game, we are back from what has been our little international break. Obviously, there's been a few games since we last recorded one, but we are back for this one, which was away to Burnley on Friday night. A game which did finish 0-0, and Sunderland become the first team in almost a calendar year to keep a clean sheet at Turf Moor, of course, excluding Burnley. I think the last team to do that was Man City in the Premier League. So that is something that we will talk about. Obviously, been a few injuries since the last time we were here to talk about Sunderland, very recently as well, some of which missed the game on Friday. But first and foremost, Michael, it is a game that no one really expected anyone to get anything out of. But we've got a point, and we'll get on to what happened during the game, but it's a point that, at the least, we deserved.
It's funny how it's fitting that I'm on here when we're talking about a clean sheet because everyone knows my stance on that by now. But you're right. We didn't expect anything. It was a complete... Well, yeah, I didn't want to say write off because I think our squad was too good for that term, but I did think it was a free hit. I mean, who really expected us to go? Well, I wouldn't have been shocked had we gone there and got something just because we know what Sunderland are like. We get results where it isn't expected. I am very surprised that we kept Burnley out for 98 minutes as it turned out, if you add the stoppage time at the end of both halves. But I was very pleasantly surprised that we kept them out, and the point was absolutely deserved. And I think if you look at the results that happened over the weekend, I know Sheffield United won, but Middlesbrough lost. So the point isn't that bad for Burnley in the circumstance. They've gained an extra point over third, and if I'm right, I think if they beat Middlesbrough in their next game, then they're promoted, aren't they, mathematically? Yeah. So yeah, that point's going to pretty much delay the inevitable. Burnley are going to walk the league. It would take a monumental Sunderland style collapse for them not to. But we deserve the point. I think that in general our balance was excellent. It's probably one of the most balanced performances I've seen. And what I mean is, obviously, aside from the obvious, defensively we were superb. I think that a couple of times Burnley got in behind us, but you expect that, don't you? They're top of the league. They're not there for no reason. They do create opportunities. They've steamrolled a lot of teams at Turf Moor. You only have to look at, say, someone like Wigan, who came up with us. I think they lost 3-0 there a few weeks back. But you look at it, they had their chances, and we put bloodies on the line when we had to. But for the most part, we kept them out. And at the other end, that we pressed them, but the difference was that we timed our press almost to perfection, because, as you know, if you press the opposition, sometimes we've had this before where we press the opposition loads early doors and then we're knackered for the rest of the game. Whereas if Sunderland were going to get anything, they had to time the press right, but also had to get it right, because if one person gets the press wrong, then straight away you're undone by one through ball. And before the game, there were Burnley fans saying, teams try to sit in against us, doesn't work. Try to press us, doesn't work. So I was very keen to see how we were going to deal with that. But yeah, to go back to your point after my typical essay-long answer, we did deserve the point. It was the very least. It would have been very harsh had we come away with nothing.
Yeah. Oh, so this was the last... I'll try that again. Oh, so this was the last of pretty much 4 fixtures that looked incredibly difficult and looked like Sunderland would get nothing out of on paper. Obviously, I can't actually remember what the last podcast we did was, but we had Norwich, Sheffield United, Luton, Burnley. Prior to these games, you lost to Stoke, lost to Coventry, lost to Rotherham, drew at home to Bristol City. So going into this run of fixtures, people
were pessimistic, to say the least, weren't they?
Pessimistic, and so. Very much a spin on it that it was going to define the season, really, as to what we got out of these games. And with how we were playing, the injuries, the results we were getting, people weren't particularly optimistic or looking forward to games. But we won 1-0 away to Norwich, lost 2-1 at home to Sheffield United, which I don't think we actually did a podcast on that one. But fair to say, we didn't deserve to lose that game. And refereeing decisions, again, are the reason that we did lose that game. An offside goal, potentially, 2 or 3 penalties in that game, which we didn't get given on another day, probably would have been given. Luton at home, obviously, I think they're 4th, 3rd.
No, they're 4th at the minute. They're only 6 points off Sheffield United as it stands.
Yeah, and obviously we've got a point against them, and again a point against Burnley. So them 4 fixtures, which a lot of people would have said we'll get 0 points from, we've come away with 5. Should have had at least 6. With that game against Sheffield United, it's a very good return, and obviously we'll get onto it a little bit, why it's an even better return and why the result against Burnley was even better than initially thought. But injuries.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to be balanced, I suppose that we say about refereeing decisions. The refereeing decision probably did gain us a point against Luton, but again, if you look at it, people saying that things even themselves out. Well, for me, that's a load of tosh because I'm still waiting for it to even itself out. Because
I think I said to someone the other day that Luton penalty and the Middlesbrough penalty were the only two big, match deciding decisions that have went forward this season.
Yeah, and we've done this on other podcasts. I'm pretty sure people don't want to listen, but we've done it countless times over how rubbish the referees are, and the points all still stand. Something has to be done about that. But for once, to be fair, this was actually a game of the Burnley game where the referee wasn't actually that bad, which is a nice change. That's the sort of standard we want
to be honest, I think, and I think it's probably worth mentioning because we always talk about how shit they are. Obviously,
I
think
he's all right. They got most of the big decisions right for me. I mean, if you look at the goal that I think was it Barr or Clark, whichever one of them, scored late on, that was the correct call. It was offside. I was just I said it in my own video. I was annoyed that the Sheffield United one was allowed to stand, but that wasn't. But that's by the by. But you're right. Across those 4 games, I didn't think we'd get no points. I thought we might maybe spring up a surprise somewhere. But I think if you look at it, if you offered us one defeat in those 4 games and a defeat that we should have got something out of, and you go away to Norwich and Burnley, who are 2 teams who were 2 leagues above us last year, and not only not only win one of them, but keep 2 clean sheets as well. I don't think anyone would have really stumped their nose at that, or shouldn't have anyway. And especially with the Burnley one, where again a lot of teams they've just swamped aside really. So to get 5 points from those games, I think is a perfect response, because after the Stoke game, I think obviously we know about the Alex Neil thing, but I think a lot of people rightly questioned the player's character that day. Even though, to be fair, most of this season they have actually shown that they've got spirit and desire, and I think in these 4 games they've proven it. And again, just sort of lead on to the Burnley game. It wasn't like we went there just to silk up pressure and sit back the whole 90 minutes. We actually went forward and had a couple of decent opportunities ourselves. So, over the 4 games, 5 points. Yes, please. When you look at the average position, the lowest that we faced was 7th, which was Norwich. 5 points is great.
Yeah. And quite frankly, there's not that much to talk about through the Burnley game, so I'll try and pad a little bit out here and there where we can. But Ballard was obviously missing for this game. He got injured on international duty for Northern Ireland.
Can I just point out, by the way, that's why I don't like international football.
I just don't like international football in general. I just think it's shit, innit?
Yeah, apart from actual tournaments, and I'm not talking Nations League, which are just glorified friendlies. I mean, like Euros and World Cups. That aside, I couldn't give a toss about international games.
World Cup, I'll give you that one. I think the rest of them just bin them personally. But that is not Burnley Sunderland. So Ballard, like I say, he was missing. He was injured for Northern Ireland in these absolutely irrelevant games. Luke O'Nien obviously started at left back in the previous game. He got moved into centre back. Lyndon Gooch, recently back from injury, gets moved to left back. It is very much a makeshift defence again. You're missing Ballard, you're missing Elise. Obviously, although Serkin was on the bench, you're essentially missing him because he's just back from injury as well. He's never going to be starting games yet. So to go to Burnley and become the first team this season to keep a clean sheet there is even more impressive when you take that into consideration.
Makeshift defence, that's standard for us.
It is.
We've had to play literally the only person. We might as well go and play Joe Gelhardt at left back at this point. But you're right. I mean, you said earlier that there wasn't that much to talk about, and that in itself is a compliment, because I expected Burnley to put it this way: we were competing very well in the game, and I think with a makeshift back line to keep out a near full strength Burnley team, I don't think they had anyone that was significant that was missing, to keep them out comfortably as well for the most part was a good testament to how they played. But like you said yourself, I mean, we were competing well, but as I kept watching the game, I kept thinking, but at any moment they're going to, like a click of a finger, they're going to turn the screw on and be 1-0 up. And I just kept waiting for that moment to arrive, and obviously thankfully it didn't. But that's a testament. We did well. And bearing in mind, another point to mention as well, we had a very young midfield out there. If you look at it, I mean, the 2 midfielders, was it Dan Neil and Peter Ekwa? Combined age between them is barely making mid-40s. So I think that says alone that, because that was the one thing I was concerned about. And I like Pierre Ekwa a lot, but I think that was one thing that did strike me a little bit nerve-wracking going into the game, that I felt like this is not the game to play someone like him. But I suppose we didn't have any other options, did we? Apart from Michu. But you're right, we competed exceptionally. And defensively, I mean, with a makeshift defence, I can't praise any of the lads higher enough. I don't think any one of them put a foot wrong.
Yeah. And I think results like this, and again, this is going to be labelled as a Burnley reaction podcast, but like I said, there's not awfully that much to talk about. But results like this, the Burnley game, even, the performance against Sheffield United, again, I'm not going to say the result because the actual result wasn't a particularly good one. But, the performance deserved a better result than we got there. The result against Luton, the result against Norwich. It bodes well for, let's be honest, I don't think playoffs are going to happen this season. We'll get onto that in a second. But
Don't tell Daniel that.
It bodes well for next season because, you look at the team that we started the season with and you look at the team that we have now. There's obviously no Dan Ballard. He's been missing for half the season, really. Dennis Serkin has been missing for quite a while. Elise ruled out for the season. Obviously, Niall Huggins, whether he'd be in the first team or not, I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, he played that game against Birmingham, and I think that's probably a second appearance at the club, since he signed last year. He's been missing the entire season. Corey Evans, halfway through the season, picked up a season-ending injury. Embleton, the same. Ross Stewart missed. He's played 13 games this season.
We've only had Ross Stewart for something like a quarter of the games, haven't we?
Yeah. He's been missing. Ellis Sims, obviously, even when he was at the club, missed half the games through injury. He gets recalled in January. We don't sign a striker. Pritchard been missing for a large part of the season. And this is all injuries to a team that finished 5th last season, get promoted, and the odds are against you to even stay in the division. But the fact that, albeit very minimal, we are in April talking about potentially still being able to make the playoffs this season with all these injuries. If the recruitment team get it right next season, top 6 should be, a minimum, really.
I agree with that. I think that, to sort of rewind a bit, I think when we got promoted, I said at the start of this season that I felt that it would be a 5-year sort of plan to get back to the Premier League, because we all know that's where the club, without sounding arrogant, belongs, and that's where the club is more sustainable at, in the top flight. However, I said 5 years because at the time I felt that the Championship would be a huge step up from League One. Now, having watched the division, and this couples with everything you've just said that's gone against us, and we have to include Alex Neil leaving as well, because that could have derailed our season potentially. To be top half of the table, whether we finish top half, I don't know, but to basically, we're not going to get dragged into a relegation battle, you wouldn't think, unless we get deducted 12 points.
18 points clear, I think we are.
Something like, Huddersfield won. Hang on, so Huddersfield on 13. I think we're 15 points because Huddersfield won the other day. But either way, that's still a huge gap with 7 games left. So really, we're not far off mathematically being confirmed as safe. I know Daniel, obviously in the group chat, was trying to make out that playoffs are going to happen. But for me, I agree with you. I think that I accepted weeks and weeks ago that was probably not going to happen. It's still a very, very effective, a very positive season. And I suppose you could argue the one frustration is, had we gone out to not splash loads of money that we didn't need to, but go out to sign a forward in January, in addition to when we brought in Gelhardt. I know he's got his detractors, but it just makes you think we could have gone for the playoffs this year. But as far as next season goes, to bring me back to my original point, I said 5 years at first. Now I honestly reckon I've chopped a couple of years off that, because I think this league isn't as good as what I think it's safe to say we felt this league would be better than it's proven to be. And I think next season, this is the one area with the recruitment team that I think there's been a lot of good work, and I've made that clear in the past. But the striker thing has got to be resolved. If that's not resolved by the end of the next window, then criticism, they don't have a leg to stand on with that. But if they do get it right next year, I agree, top 6 should be the minimum expectation, because people can say whatever they want. Club size, I think, does make a difference. I think it does matter. And I think there's only so long Sunderland will be. This season we're content with what's happened. Next season isn't so much a free hit. Next season,
I think the best way to put it as well is the start of the season, very first podcast we said that there's 2 games Sunderland are not the underdogs for.
Which was Wigan and Rotherham.
Yeah, if I asked you the same question now, there'd probably be 2 or 3 games that Sunderland are underdogs for. And that just shows how far they have come since the start of the season.
Yeah, exactly. We would have been underdogs in pretty much every one of the last 4 games, which is fair enough. Burnley, we played the top 2. We played Luton, who aren't far off second, and we played Norwich, who are just outside the playoffs. So those games, fair enough. I agree that we would have been underdogs for them. If you look, this is another testament, I suppose. If you look at our last 7 fixtures, there's only really West Brom and Watford who I would argue we're not favourites for. And that in itself shows how well the team has done. And again, as you said, with all of these injuries gone against us, with Alex Neil going, with Ellis Sims getting recalled, there's a lot of things conspiring against you from the start, and it isn't just like everything's happened at once. It's literally happened throughout the whole season. How often have we had a full strength 11 this season? I would argue maybe 2 months at most across the season that we've had a near full strength squad, and you could argue that's the blame on the recruitment team for not planning for it. But at the same time, when you look at the amount of injuries we've had and at once as well, you can't plan for that. That's just completely unlucky. And I know any team can say it, but my goodness me, I'd be very hard pressed to find a team that has had as much bad luck with injuries as what we have. As you said, Evans out for the season, Ross Stewart effectively out for the season, barring 10 games. Dan Ballard out for a long time, Ellis Sims out for a long time, then recalled. It's just mental. So next season, yes, though, I agree. I think we need to have a better balance. I think we need to have, if we can get the recruitment right, there is absolutely no reason why we can't push for the top 6 as a minimum, because we're not far away as it is now.
Yeah. And I suppose the one thing that you do have to be careful with is,
on top of that, yes, okay, maybe he's not the most technically gifted player in the world, but as you said, he's got technical quality about him. If you look at the goal we scored at Rotherham, I think he was the one who put the ball in for Gelhardt. That's not a bad cross. He sprayed balls before across the pitch where it's got us going in an attack. So yeah, Luke O'Nien, I've got very fond memories of him. But anyway, he's my second player, I think. Yeah. And again, to be makeshift against a team that's top of the league and will go up winning the league at a canter as well, I think that says a lot. He got into Nathan Teller's head. If you remember, there was the occasion in the second half, I think it was, where where Nathan Teller was trying to get to the ball and Luke O'Nien basically shields it very well, and he gets into his head. You can tell just watching the camera angles back. Only disappointing for him is that he didn't kiss anyone. That was a bit of a letdown.
Didn't.
But we'll let that one slide. And obviously number one, and I know Kyle and Daniel in particular are going to love this. Number one for me, a clear man of the match is Lyndon Gooch. I think that everyone knows I've criticised him a lot going forward, and a lot of my criticism of him as a winger still remains. I don't think his decision making is anywhere near consistently good enough to be in that position, especially not in the Championship. However, when he's playing as a fullback or as a defender, I've got absolutely no problem with him being there. Even before when the team was announced and Gooch was playing, I was actually quite happy about that, because the industrious work rate he has, he looks like he's got a bit of muscle on him now as well. He's got pace. His work ethic's excellent. And again, I think it was him who was up against Nathan Teller for a lot of the game. And Nathan Teller is someone who I think scored 19 goals in 40 appearances for Burnley. Yeah. And for the most part, bar one or two occasions where Teller got past him, I thought Gooch got the better of him all game. I think the fact some of the tackles he made were just last-ditch ones was superb. That is one of the best performances I've ever seen from Lyndon Gooch. And I think for him, I might have to adjust my own opinion of him a little bit, because I do think he's got something to offer. Maybe not starting every week, but certainly as a squad player, I'll have no complaints whatsoever about him being there. But Lyndon Gooch, I don't know what you think, but for me, Bart third, O'Nien second, and Gooch for me, clear man of the match. But nobody had below a 7 out of 10 if you're going to give ratings.
Yeah, that is fair. Well, next game is Hull City on Friday. After these run of games that we've had, I think it's fair to say you'd expect Sunderland to win that.
Although this is the Championship, I would want to point that out.
It is, and this is Sunderland. So, but I'm gonna babble on a tiny little bit while I just get Sky Sports up and notice that Hull City are currently 17th, 48 points, 6 points behind Sunderland. There's still 7 games left. Sunderland are 7 points from the playoffs. It's mathematically possible.
Let's put it this way, just to sort of cut in there. If you're going to look into the playoff conversation in the next 4 games, I think it's Hull at home.
I think you have to win the rest of the games.
Basically, but I was going to say, like the next 4 in particular, Hull, Cardiff, Birmingham, and Huddersfield. And apart from Cardiff, they're all at the Stadium of Light. And the one thing that's sort of the biggest criticism is our home form hasn't been good enough, really. And I do think we do need to improve that. If you're really still wanting to look at the playoffs, then you need to be getting at least 10 points out of these next 4, maybe 12. So you could argue, just to give yourselves a chance. I don't view it that way, but if you want to look at the playoffs, then that's definitely something. For me, the expectations adjusted to finishing top half now. I think if you get a top half finish, then I think that's a very good first season back. But yeah,
just end the season strongly, really, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what you want. These are the next 7 games are where the likes of Pierre Ekwa needs to be playing, and where the likes of I was going to say Jewison Bennett, but he's out injured now, isn't he? There's another one. Even though he wasn't starting, but he's out injured. But these are the games where you want to give these guys first team exposure for next season when we're going to need to use them. But it's a Good Friday, and I think there'll be a lot of people that are going to be a bit merry because it's a It's a 5:30 kickoff, isn't it?
It is a 5:30
Yeah,
kickoff.
Yeah, that's my plan. So I mean, I don't drink, but I'll be going out into the pub and watching all the football and then going to the game. But no, this is a game that on paper you want to win. I mean, if you're capable of going to Burnley and getting a draw, then you're definitely capable of beating Hull at home. But as we know, Sunderland and the Championship don't work like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see whether it's a Good Friday or not. Predictions based, do you think it's going to be a Good Friday?
I'm going to say Jack Dross special 1-1. Oh, by the way, announced Newcastle's academy getting 1-1 draws. Now I've said that.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I think it'll be a 1-1 draw. I think Hull are actually a competitive, solid side, and I think those type of teams we tend to struggle against at home. One thing I will say, just quickly to mention the referees. You notice how the referee was constantly telling us to hurry up when we were wasting time against Burnley.
It won't happen. Don't worry about that.
If the referees do not do exactly the same thing again for Hull on Friday, then it proves my point that the officials are just even more awful than we've said they are already. But yeah, I think 1-1, which wouldn't be terrible. But if you know, I think at home, I'd like to see us get a couple of wins at home between now and the end of the season and set a platform for next year.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. That is Friday, 5:30 kickoff. I think it's on Sky Red Button. I think. I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, we'll have a podcast out hopefully some point over that weekend to talk about that game, and of course look ahead to the next game, which off the top of my head I have no idea who it is.
It's away at Cardiff.
There we go. Always knew you could come in with that one.
There you
Cardiff
go. I'm just
away.
sad. That's why I'm just sad. That's why I know that stuff.
Cardiff away after Hull. Like I say, obviously having the podcast after that as well. But until then, we will see you later.
That's all, folks.